A meeting was held in the Great Hall of the People with students from Beijing University and other colleges. At the meeting, Liu Shaoqi, Deng Xiaoping, and Zhou Enlai were sitting on the stage.
Unknown to the participants, Mao was listening backstage. Dr. Li sat next to him.
Liu Shaoqi described how the Cultural Revolution started. He said, "We veteran revolutionaries have encountered new problems, and we don't know how to deal with them." Mao immediately said, "I hear you. What veteran revolutionaries? You're an old counter-revolutionary." My heart sank. It was already very clear that in Mao's eyes, Liu Shaoqi was no longer the head of state, no longer a communist. He was an old counter-revolutionary. Mao had already condemned him. I knew Liu Shaoqi would have no way out, no way out.
Within weeks, Mao reordered the party hierarchy. Deng Xiaoping was demoted to number 6. Liu Shaoqi even lower to number 8. Lin Biao replaced him.
Chairman Mao says, Marxism consists of thousands of truths, but they all boil down to one phrase: it's right to rebel.
Students banded together to carry out Mao's orders. They called themselves Red Guards. On August 18, 1966, Mao began a series of public appearances, greeting millions of young people in Tiananmen Square. Donning the armband of the Red Guards, Mao gave them his blessing.
We saw Mao wave to us. He said something, but we couldn't hear clearly. Later we learned that he said we should carry on the Cultural Revolution to the end. We felt it was the greatest honor of our lives to see Mao in person.
With Mao's approval, the Red Guards traveled for free around the country to gain revolutionary experience. In September 1966, schools did not open for the academic year.
This was the first chance we had to break away from our parents, to do whatever we wanted.
The first morning, we were in high spirits. We sang revolutionary songs as we walked. We walked the whole day. The second day, we had blisters on our feet, and we were exhausted. Army trucks often passed us on the way. The Liberation Army men would say, "Chairman Mao's Red Guards, where are you going?" We answered, "We're going to Beijing to see Chairman Mao and to get revolutionary experience." Then they would say, "Good, our truck is empty, we'll give you a lift." We would answer, "Thank you, Liberation Army men, we want to walk to Beijing. We'll spread Mao Zedong thought and get revolutionary experience on the way." The 13 of us walked and walked for many days.
On October 1st, 1966, National Day, the rallies with Mao reached their most extravagant level.
Long live our great leader, Chairman Mao. And
Lin
long
Biao,
live
now called Mao's closest comrade in arms, led the ceremony. encouraged the Red Guards to attack Western influences and to destroy the four olds: old ideas, old culture, old customs, old habits. Without this destruction, he said, socialism cannot be achieved. The Red Guards tore down street signs and put up new revolutionary names. They ransacked museums, libraries, and temples. They searched and looted people's homes.
At first, they took my books, together with a bookcase. The second time, they searched for money. Here are things that would get me in trouble. Later, they took the sewing machine and sofa, even the desk. There was no reason for it. My children were scared to death, shaking with fear.
Groups of Red Guards roamed the countryside, urging peasants to attack local officials. They came to Wugong in November 1966. Some villagers seized the chance to take revenge against officials who for years had given the best grain to the state.
They criticized old Shu. They said, "You old woman, you sifted and selected until there wasn't a single husk in the grain. You delivered such good grain to the state. You didn't want to leave any for us to eat, did you?" Several people went up to the platform and put a tall paper hat, it was at least this tall, on old Shu's head. They held her by the scruff of the neck and paraded her through the streets.
The violence soon turned against traditional targets of class struggle, like the former landlord's son, Li Mao Shou.
I was tied up, hung up, and beaten on. One afternoon, I passed out 4 times. I stopped breathing. Later, they didn't even have to hit me. My breathing would stop when they hung me up. That's how bad it got. In China, fathers and sons traditionally have close ties. But now you had to end your relationship. It was really sad, but you just had to do it. After my son was struggled against for the first time, I claimed that our relationship had been broken off. Awful things would have happened to him if I hadn't done that.
Throughout China, party officials, intellectuals, people with foreign connections, former businessmen, millions were paraded and beaten in public. It is estimated that at least 400,000 people were killed.
We called him Secretary Zhang. He was the secretary at the state farm where my mother had worked. We all knew him when we were children. Once he dragged me by the ear for hundreds of yards. The side of my head got all swollen. He treated his subordinates very badly. When the Cultural Revolution came, the Red Guards and workers dragged him out to struggle with. He was not treated nicely because he'd been so mean to people. He was forced to kneel on the ground, on sand, broken stones, and glass for more than 2 hours. He knelt with a heavy board hanging from his neck. It had his name written on it, with red crosses through it. That's how someone who was going to be shot was treated. The board was hanging on a very thin wire, so after 2 hours, blood oozed out on the wire and dripped down. He was over 50, or close to 60, and he was struggled against many, many times because people really hated him. Soon he died.
The people we beat up were all hooligans and loose women whose names were given to us by the workers. I put them on a truck and told them to kneel down. I whipped them with a leather belt. There were men and women. Most were women. We beat them hard. I had a kind of animal instinct. I used to enjoy beating people.
I didn't know most of the people who were struggled against. When we heard different views, we wondered, if you sympathized with the party official, did it mean you were too simplistic? Did it mean you lacked political consciousness and couldn't see his evil capitalist roader nature? Whenever a question came up, our first reaction was not to believe the official might be innocent, but that we were too naive and too inexperienced.
I didn't think about it much. Chairman Mao called on us to be involved with affairs of state, to be active in making revolution. We felt this was revolution. Chairman Mao had said, a revolution is an insurrection, an act of violence by which one class overthrows another. It's not a dinner party. We had to be rough and harsh and wild.
In my class, there was a student whose grandfather had owned a big fabric store, so he was a capitalist. I heard that everyone was to go to their house to criticize him. I got there late, and by the time I arrived, the capitalist had been beaten to death. I remember that his head was all swollen and dark and bruised. I didn't look for long, and then we all left. But later I learned that this capitalist was killed after my classmates got there. Other students and probably Red Guards from the neighborhood also got involved. All those people beat him to death, including his own granddaughter, my classmate. I didn't think much about it then because this kind of thing happened a lot. But years later, I thought about it many times and I wanted to find an answer. The question was very difficult. It was, if I had not arrived late, what would I have done? Would I have beaten him? He was a capitalist, but at the same time he was a man, an old man. I have never been able to answer this question.
By 1967, the Radical Cultural Revolution Group dominated the government. Members included Lin Biao and Mao's wife, Jiang Qing. She often appeared as Mao's spokesperson and had gained great power. Her calls for violent struggle were immediately obeyed by millions of Red Guards. Moderate leaders, repulsed by the fanaticism, felt closer to Zhou Enlai. Zhou's role in the Cultural Revolution is ambiguous. He tried to moderate events, but in the end he always sided with Mao. He tried to protect people, but his power had limits. Many close to him would soon be brutally attacked.
People from the Cultural Revolution Group told us to drag out Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping and overthrow them. Crowds of people filled the street. Loudspeakers were blasting towards Zhongnan High, demanding that Liu be handed over to be struggled against. It was very revolutionary, very fashionable to drag him out.
Zhou tried to send the students away. He warned Liu and his wife, Wang Guangmei, to stay inside the leader's compound at Zhongnan High. In April 1967, Red Guards tricked Wang into leaving, saying one of her daughters had had an accident. They dragged her in front of this crowd. They dressed her as a whore and repeatedly humiliated her. Later, Wang Guangmei was jailed. She spent 12 years in solitary confinement. Deng Xiaoping was struggled against and exiled to a remote village. Liu Shaoqi was attacked and beaten. He was kept under house arrest for 2 years. Then, weakened by torture and cancer, no longer able to eat, speak, or use his hands, he was wrapped in a sheet and flown to this remote prison. Weeks later, Liu Shaoqi, China's head of state for 10 years, died, naked and alone. In 1967, the Cultural Revolution entered a new stage, factional warfare. The Red Guards had never been a unified movement. At first, only students with good communist backgrounds were admitted. The millions of young people left out formed their own groups and called themselves rebels.
We organized our own Red Guards. We called ourselves the Red Guards of Mao Zedong thought. We were part of the rebels. We made armbands the same as the others. You say you're defending Chairman Mao? Okay, so am I. You're making revolution? So am I.
At first, the rebels and Red Guards clashed over ideology. Then they fought for local power. Soon, millions of workers and soldiers joined the conflicts. In Shanghai, the rebel group, led by colleagues of Mao's wife, Jiang Qing, overthrew the local party committee. Mao immediately supported the rebels. Now that the revolutionary forces in Shanghai have risen up, he declared, there is hope for China. Across the country, rebel groups responded by trying to seize power from local party authorities.
Each faction had its own weapons. They robbed military arsenals, and army units supported one faction or another. They gave their side weapons. I really wanted to have a gun.
Before and after every action, we used Mao's songs and quotations to encourage ourselves. Be resolute, be daring, overcome all obstacles, and be victorious.
They weren't just small fights. It was real war. There were ex-servicemen on both sides. They'd fought in many wars. Both sides had expert marksmen and soldiers who could drive tanks and use artillery. Several people died in each battle.
In Beijing, embassies were attacked. Rebel factions occupied the foreign ministry for 2 weeks. The violence Mao had unleashed had spiraled beyond even his control. He described the summer of 1967 as utter chaos and all-out civil war. Again and again, Zhou Enlai, on Mao's behalf, ordered the different factions to stop fighting, but they did not. Finally, in July 1968, Mao turned on the Red Guards and rebels, personally ordering them to disband. This time they obeyed, as soldiers took over schools and colleges and terrorized the students into submission.
A few people called the dictatorship team came in. The person who was declared a criminal was dragged out of his seat. Then two from the dictatorship team would hit the person's legs with their rods so that he would kneel. Then they'd handcuff you and announce your crimes. They shoved your head down. The rest of the audience would shout slogans and you were dragged away. It was scary. You never knew who would be next.
By the end of 1968, rigid conformity and repression ruled people's lives as never before. The army, under Lin Biao, pushed the cult of Mao to new heights. People had to report all their thoughts to Mao twice a day. Twice a day, wherever they were, they danced the loyalty dance.
I was a little disgusted with the cult of Mao, and I said a few things. Lin Biao had said every sentence Chairman Mao said was the truth. I said nobody can say everything that is the truth. So I was labeled a reactionary student. At school, they held several criticism meetings against me. What was most unbearable, and even today still makes me uncomfortable, was that none of my friends would speak to me. I became totally isolated.
We heard older people talk about Jiang Qing and knew they really looked down on her. So we made up jokes. And we said the chaos of the Cultural Revolution was due to Jiang Qing, and Mao should divorce her. Jiang Qing's group heard about what we said.
For his casual remarks, Zhang Longlong spent the next 10 years in jail. At the end of 1968, Mao started a campaign to have city youth, former Red Guards and rebels, re-educated by the peasants. Millions of families were wrenched apart as young people were sent to spend years in China's most remote regions. But for some, it was a chance to start anew.
After we got onto the tractor, one of the students asked me something. I remember that as soon as she opened her mouth, I cried because it had been a very, very long time since anyone had spoken to me. Later, I told them I was not like them. I was someone who was wrong, who was guilty. But they were especially nice to me. We stayed together for 5 years. Even now, they are my best friends.
April 1969.
共产党第9次全国代表大会现在开始。
Most delegates at the Congress were radicals who had risen to power through the Cultural Revolution. Many moderate officials were still under attack and in prison. Lin Biao, long seen as Mao's heir apparent, was officially appointed his successor. Lin's keynote speech signaled a new government preoccupation with foreign relations. He denounced both the Soviet Union and the United States as imperialists and enemies. Just weeks before, fighting had broken out on the border between China and the Soviet Union. Mao and Zhou Enlai now saw the Soviet Union as a greater threat than their traditional enemy, America. They sent signals to the U.S. that they would like to begin talks. Lin Biao opposed the overtures to America. He is alleged to have plotted a coup against Mao. In September 1971, when the plot was discovered, Lin reportedly tried to escape. But his plane crashed over Mongolia.
The death of Lin Biao was a great shock to everyone. Before his death, the entire propaganda machine treated him as the heir to Mao Zedong. He had very high stature, second only to Mao. People treated him as a revolutionary saint. Now, suddenly, he was a traitor, a very bad person.
After Lin Biao died, we stopped the daily rituals praising Mao and Lin. The fanaticism faded. It was as if we had all been in a dream.